A buyer submits an offer on a property, and the seller accepts it. A few days later, the buyer backs out of the deal without a valid contractual reason. The seller wants to keep the earnest money deposit. What happens to the earnest money deposit if the buyer withdraws from the contract without a valid reason? A. The seller must automatically refund the earnest money to the buyer. B. The seller can keep the earnest money deposit if the buyer breached the contract without justification. C. The buyer can demand the deposit back regardless of the reason for withdrawal. D. The earnest money automatically goes to the listing broker. Correct answer, B. The seller can keep the earnest money deposit if the buyer breached the contract without justification. Earnest money is a good faith deposit made by the buyer to demonstrate serious intent to purchase the property. If the buyer backs out without a valid contingency, such as financing, inspection, or appraisal, the buyer is in default under the contract. In such cases, the seller is usually entitled to retain the earnest money as liquidated damages for the buyer's breach. For instance, if a buyer cancels simply because they found another home, the seller may keep the deposit. However, if the buyer cancels due to a failed financing contingency or a serious defect found during an inspection, the deposit must be returned to the buyer.